The Supreme Court, when it first began interpreting the First Amendment in 1919, upheld the convictions of a broad range of individuals who had criticized World War I and the draft on the ground that such speech could interfere with the ability of the government to draft soldiers and to fight the war successfully, and therefore it could be prohibited. And then later, during the communist era in the 1950s, the Supreme Court upheld the convictions of all of the leaders of the Communist Party on the ground that their speech could be harmful to the nation. And during the Civil Rights era, lower courts upheld convictions of civil rights marchers because they triggered a response by white onlookers that was seen as violent, and therefore you could punish the marchers for doing this. And over time, what the Supreme Court came to understand is, first of all, we cannot trust ourselves to have the authority to decide what we as Americans can say. In the moment, we may think we are being fair-minded and balanced and appropriate and proportionate, but with hindsight, we realize that our judgment has been severely colored by the circumstances and by the pressures of the time. And what the court learned over those decades is that it cannot trust ourselves and it cannot trust itself to have the authority to approve the suppression of speech when that speech might be offensive to others. And even if it causes harm, unless the harm is essentially likely to create a imminent and grave danger. And one wouldn't start there. If one wanted to begin in 1919, one would have a hard time justifying such an extreme approach to free speech. And even though, as we know, Justice Holmes and Justice Brandeis embraced an approach somewhat like that very early on, it's not even clear they would have carried it as far as we do today. So I think a lot of First Amendment jurisprudence on this issue is the product of learning from our own mistakes and learning we cannot trust ourselves. And in particular, we cannot trust ourselves to allow the majority to decide what points of view can be prohibited. Yes, you can regulate speech in terms of the time, place, and manner of speech, not based on the message being communicated, as long as it's reasonable. But as soon as the government picks out particular points of view, whether it be anti-war speech or communist speech or civil rights speech or hate speech, we don't trust ourselves to do that. And we therefore err dramatically on the side of guaranteeing free speech. And there's a cost to that. It means we're allowing speech that does cause all sorts of harm in society. But what we learned is that better to deal with those harms than with the danger of giving the government the power to decide which ideas and which points of view it will censor.